Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the next round of EU clusters talks. We will talk about textiles today. They have a profound impact on the local economy and local communities across all the EU regions. They generate jobs, create business opportunities. They are an integral part of European culture as well, but there is a very strong aim to mitigate the impact of the textile industry on the environment through a series of new game-changing regulations. We will hear of some of them today. For the textile ecosystem, the Commission has an ambitious vision. For example, by 2030, textile products placed on the EU market should be long-lived and recyclable to a great extent, made of recycled fibres, free of hazardous substances, and so on and so forth. In this context, the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, on behalf of the European Commission, DG GROW, organizes this round of talks. EU clusters talk a transition pathway for textiles for sustainable and circular value chains. So welcome everybody. We will be discussing the upcoming transition pathway, initiatives from sustainability, critical challenges for the twin transition in the textile ecosystem, the role of clusters as well to support the transition. My name is Jubila Kropaite, and let me get you introduced to the agenda for today. We will hear some news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. We will hear two perspectives from DG GROW, European Commission, about transition pathway for textiles, as well as the textiles labeling regulation. We will then go into a panel debate, and we'll end by funding opportunities that there are on the market. So let me go straight to the housekeeping rules, which I will remind you of. Do use the Q&A function to ask questions, and also the chat function to comment or share links. Do raise your hand and we will give you the floor if you want to speak. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, that is very much welcome as well. We want this to be as instrumental as it can get. So the event, you make most of this event too. When you take the floor, if you do unmute yourself and activate your camera, please. And the session is being recorded. So these are very, very briefly the housekeeping rules. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being with us. And without much further ado, I want to give the floor to Nina Hopman of the European Cluster Collaboration Platform to give us a bit of news. Thank you, Nina. Good morning.
Thank you, Jubila, and good morning to everybody. First of all, in our news block for today, we would like to invite you to the second Booster Academy, which will take place as the online event 2 days on the 6th and 7th of June, and the 2-day in-person training session in Turin, Italy on the 21st and 22nd of September. You can still apply for this 4-day training until the 24th of May. So if you want, please register for the Cluster Booster Academy so that you can participate and receive, apart from these 4 days, also individual coaching sessions that the team provides. We will talk about practical skills for effective cluster actions, develop plans, talk about the different services clusters offer to SMEs, how you can further develop them, and how to improve the skills of the cluster staff. Furthermore, we would like to invite you to the Clusters Meet Regions in Sweden, which will take place on 15th and 16th of June. We will meet in Malmö, the region Skåne, and we will talk about the different specialization areas in the region and how clusters act as drivers for regional competitiveness. We expect to have around 100 clusters, companies, but also representatives from national and regional public authorities and business support organizations, both from Sweden and the EU. So come to Skåne and discuss with us about the role of clusters in regional competitiveness. I also want to remind you that there's a new tool available on the ECCP, the so-called Trend Universe. It's a strategic foresight instrument that you can use to better understand future trends and the impact that these trends have on cluster organizations. You can make an assessment, you can see assessments from other clusters, and also explore trends that have already been identified for the 14 different industrial ecosystems for the green and digital transition. And this tool is available for ECCP Pro users, so update your profile and then come to check out what the Trend Universe has in store for you. We are collaborating as well in the Food and Bio Global Summit, which will take place in Denmark on the 26th and 27th of September. So you can already save the date for this. We will talk about challenges and solutions for sustainable ecosystems in the food and bioresource industry. And specifically, topics will be plant-based nutrition, technologies to maximize biomass production, circular solutions, and new food systems. So we will keep you posted on the registration, but for now, save the date. And last but not least, there is a survey that might be relevant for, I think, nearly all of you. It is about electronic invoicing. So how does e-invoicing in public procurement in the single market could be more effective? What are the needs that you have regarding technical solutions, transmissions, and efficiency, especially? We would like, the Commission would like to hear from the SMEs, but also from clusters and all the stakeholders using e-invoicing. So you can fill in this survey until the end of June so that the answers can be useful for a report and for possible next actions on e-invoicing. And with that, back to you, Theresa.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for all of this overview. Without much further ado, we will move to hear the perspectives of the European Commission. Transition pathway for textiles is next, and I would like to give the floor to Policy Officer at DG Grow, Cecilia Nilsson-Botka. Good morning, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy to be here and also to learn a bit more of the activities of the cluster initiatives that is ongoing. Yes, so now I'll turn to the textiles ecosystem transition pathway, which is a work stream that we have been working on for over a year, actually, in DG Grow. We have been involvement of a great number of stakeholders. Just a few words first. When we speak, maybe it's clear to everyone, but I just wanted to clarify that when we speak about the textiles ecosystem, we do include textile, clothing, leather, and footwear. And as also mentioned in the introduction, the textile ecosystem is very important for the European economy, but it also has major effects on the climate and the environment. So moving the textile sector to more sustainable, to more sustainability requires changes in the way we produce, use, and dispose of textile products. With this, I think we move on to the next slide. Yes, so building on the Green Deal ambition and the Circular Economy Action Plan and the updated EU industrial strategy, textiles are identified as a key value chain with a need for action. And the updated industrial strategy also calls for the co-creation of transition pathways for the industrial ecosystems, and textiles is one of them. So this, I think, will be the fourth transition pathway, which will be finalized very soon. We will come to the timing a little bit later. But first, I mean, the objective of the transition pathway is to build something together with the stakeholders in what we call a co-creation process. And this is to make the ecosystem greener, more digital, and more resilient, and also to increase the competitiveness of the ecosystem. And it's also important, and this is what I have tried to do, to identify together with stakeholders what actions are needed to accompany this transition. With this, I think we move on to the next slide. Here is a very brief overview of the process so far. it's what we call this this co-creation process. Like I said, it started a little bit over a year ago with the publication of a staff working document and an online survey. And we had quite a large number of responses, around 100 from both industry and academics and so on. And building on the input that we have received, we organized 4 workshops in the themes of sustainability, digitalization, resilience, and the social dimension. And we also had a concluding workshop to wrap up, to see if we could agree on some proposed actions to carry forward. And all this was then summarized in a report. That was a report with the input from the survey and the workshops, and that was published just before Christmas. And following this, now we are working to finalize our transition pathway policy report. It has been slightly delayed. Now it's really should be finalized soon, so to say. I don't say a date, but it should be very soon now in Q2, probably towards end of May. This is what we would hope for, but no precise date yet. But it's really wrapping up. We had a lot of comments that we're taking on board. We're looking to see how to streamline the report a bit. It will probably include around 50 specific actions. So this is, it's like it's still to be finally agreed upon from our side. And once we publish the policy report, we will also launch a call for commitment. And this is the start of the co-implementation process. With this, we invite stakeholders to come forward with their concrete actions to bring forward the actions identified in the transition pathway. With this, I think we can then move to the next slide. This shows a little bit brief overview again of the structure of the transition pathway. It's built on the blueprint developed by the Industrial Forum. And it's built around 8 building blocks. And each of these building blocks covers a specific dimension, so to say, of the transition. And under each building block, there will be specific actions. And these actions there will be more related to sustainability and resilience, and some a bit more on digitalization. But this is the broad structure of the transition pathway. So we can go to the next slide again. And just wanted to give a little bit the insight to what we have discussed with stakeholders. So regarding resilience and competitiveness, we examined topics such as how to strengthen EU's role in global value chains, the skills shortage, and funding and investments to improve the resilience of the ecosystem. And the consultation also identified a need for stronger use of trade policies to promote exports and to strengthen market surveillance to ensure a level playing field. And high-end fashion products and innovative niche products and circular and sustainable products were actually identified by stakeholders as a market opportunity. And this is interesting to see. And here under this, we are planning actions on how to strengthen market surveillance and also how to support SMEs through both the Enterprise Europe Network and the Eurocluster initiative. We can go on to the next slide. Sustainability, which is one really main theme of the transition pathway. And here we are looking at to support the ecosystem to transform and achieve a green and circular textiles ecosystem as foreseen in the EU textile strategy. I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the textile strategy, but it sets out a vision and a framework to facilitate the transition of the textiles ecosystem towards increased circularity and sustainability, and to this end announces actions, including legal initiatives along the whole textiles value chain. So the first important aspect here is the regulatory framework, as multiple regulations are on horizon. And here is the transition pathway will give a brief overview of some of the ongoing or planned regulations relevant for the textiles ecosystem. But of course, it's a policy report, so it does not propose any new legislation. And some of these initiatives are the proposal for a regulation on eco-design for sustainable products, the introduction of a digital product passport, the revision of the Waste Framework Directive, and the planned review of the textile labeling regulation that my colleague will speak more about in a few minutes. And there will also be the mentioning of the consumer legislation, the green claims proposal, and other important regulations such as this corporate sustainability due diligence, the sustainability reporting directive, and so on. There are many very relevant legislations upcoming. But other aspects that we also looked into is how to promote and support new circular practices, services, and business models, how to support SMEs for development of green skills, and on how to onboard consumers, because of course the consumer involvement is really important to make the transition towards sustainability a success. And for example, how launching consumer campaigns to create awareness is also try to reshape consumption patterns. So I think we can move on to the next slide, which touches upon the digitalization aspect. And I mean, digitalization provides the tools to make the textile manufacturing more competitive and sustainable. And sorry about that. And generally, the textiles ecosystem is seen as lagging behind in digitalization. So there is a need for a reskilling and upskilling of workers, and this is very much stressed in the consultation process. And this is ongoing in the work on the EU Pact for Skills, where digital skills are an important element. And a strong alliance has been built under the EU Textiles Pact between industry, educational providers, and public authorities that now needs to be implemented through national regional skills partnerships. And other important aspects are, for example, to develop sector-specific digital standards, improve access of the industry to support structures for digitalization, and support the development and uptake of new digital technologies. So this is a very brief overview of topics that we discussed with stakeholders. And so we are trying to carry forward in the policy report and also to have specific actions regarding this and more, so to say. So we can go on to the next slide. Yes, and this is actually coming to what's next. Like I said, yes, there will be the publication of the textiles transition pathway, hopefully very soon, with around 50 specific actions. And as I mentioned, then we will launch a call for commitments. And we really hope for a broad participation of stakeholders, so to make this transition a success. So I hope you all will stay tuned and speak to you probably more when all this is published and launched. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Could you maybe say very briefly, you said that it was slightly delayed and you expect the transition pathway policy reports to be available maybe at the end of this month. Would you say what is causing the most discussions? Is it the level of discussions that is delaying the process?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, in the commission, we had this as a big consultation with other services, and it was not. We had a lot of interest in the transition pathway. So it's not any specific reason for the delay. It was just we have to digest and try to incorporate as much as possible, and have a final look and check and so on. So there is not any major reason for the delay, more than that it's a, as it stands now, it gives a broad overview of all relevant aspects of the sector. We will see. We will still try to streamline this a bit to be a bit more comprehensive. This is what we are looking at the moment. So, but like I said, it should soon be ready.
Okay. And also, just very briefly as well, you said about the support for SMEs for development of the new skills. Could you say anything more specific from the point of view of the Commission?
Well, I'm not. It's my. We are following. I mean, this is our colleague who is following this a lot with the Textiles Pact for Skills. And it's, as I understand, still to be a bit more, what do you say, to implement it. So I don't have, unfortunately, so much more to say about this. But okay. If there are more specific questions, we can come back. I mean, I can. Yeah.
People can always contact you as well, right?
Exactly. So a bit more specific answer. Yeah.
Okay, we will move now to the textile labeling regulation. Thank you so much, Cecilia, for presenting the transition pathway for textiles, sort of a framework. Antonio de Sousa Maya, legal officer at DG Grow, is with us. Antonio, I hope you can hear us and see us, and we're all ears.
Hello, indeed, I can hear you and see you. I hope you do too. It's a pleasure to be here. So indeed, I'm going to present a short overview, actually, of all the regulatory initiatives, but with a focus on the textile labeling regulation. So if we move to the next slide. So indeed, as Cecilia, my colleague, said, there was a textile strategy adopted last March last year, actually. And it presents a whole new vision and a whole new strategy for textiles. Textiles are the fourth most polluting industrial source of pollution in the world, and we needed to act. So we have an all-encompassing strategy with a lot of non-regulatory, so soft law measures. Cecilia talked about the transition pathway. There's also financing, there are guidelines, there are campaigns for consumers and companies. But indeed, we have a large regulatory package. There will be a sort of a regulatory shock for the sector because it's until now it's a sector which is not so much regulated, especially not in a sector-specific way. It will become one. And the initiatives, the main regulatory initiatives, you have it there on the slide. So first and foremost, I would say eco-design, clearly setting out information and performance requirements for textile products. This will require the placers on the market to describe the environmental characteristics of their products. And then the performance part is actually to ban the worst performing products from the market. They will not be allowed to place them on the market. There's also some controversial rules on banning potentially the destruction of unsold or returned textiles. And then an information and traceability tool, much talked about, also the digital product passport. And actually this is where the labeling feeds in. So we think that specifically for consumers, the digital product passport is also an information tool for consumers, but also for companies themselves and for market authorities. But specifically for consumers, we feel that we need labels to convey all the relevant information in a clear way, easily readable way, easily comparable way, visually appealing. So this is why we will act to give a complete overhaul actually of the textile labeling regulation. And this linked not only to eco design, which is one of the main pieces of legislation coming, but all the other ones. So the extended producer responsibility schemes are coming for textiles. It's not the proposal is not adopted yet, but it's more or less certain it will be adopted before the summer. So they are to internalize the external environmental impact of textiles from the waste perspective. Then we have an international dimension also with due diligence obligations, prohibiting the placing of products made by forced label on the market, and then green claims, which is a bit on the sides of on the margins of this labeling, because it actually fills the gaps regarding labels which are not harmonized at EU law. But here today we're going to talk about the forthcoming harmonized labels for textile products. So next slide. Is just to give you a schematic overview of the whole regulatory approach. So we have three pillars. We have the central one, which is product legislation, very linked to consumer legislation. You have the initiatives distributed there. As you can see, textile labeling regulation is at the crossroads between consumer legislation and product legislation. And then on the right, you do have the global strategy for sustainability. Not only global terms, it's not only environmental sustainability, it's also social sustainability is also important. So next slide. So indeed, specifically on the textile labeling regulation. So we do have a regulation already. This is why we're revising it, but it's not. It's 10 years old, and it actually largely comes from previous directives. So it hasn't been, the rules themselves, substantive terms haven't been revised for a while. We feel it's now time. New digital labeling technologies have come up and have become affordable. Before they were very expensive. Now we feel that they are affordable. There are new fiber technologies coming up, new recycling technologies coming up. There are new EU rules, as I just shown, that will be coming for textiles other than labeling. So we feel that the rules on labeling need to keep up with all these changes, also for to ensure regulatory consistency. But the main drivers for this reform are the problem drivers that we see currently. So first of all, the growing environmental impact of textiles. If in the strategy you will read that if we did nothing, the impact of textiles will actually grow exponentially to levels which are unbearable. So we definitely need to do something. But then also there is integration of the internal market. Why? Because member states, knowing this impact and also for other reasons, are already legislating on their own. This is disintegrating the internal market. We need to harmonize and bring uniformity of rules across the internal market. And then also consumer information deficit, not only because some key information we feel is not being conveyed to consumers, but also these disparate rules across member states are not making it easy for a consumer to understand clearly the characteristics of textile products. So there are two main objectives. You see them at the bottom. There are two main objectives of the revision of the textile labeling regulation. One is indeed consumer information. This is what characterizes a label. It's clear information. It's simple. It's easily comparable, as opposed to the digital product passport, which will have a huge set of information, which is more to consult in detail and when you have more time. But at the moment of purchase, it's actually the label that we expect will conform your consumer behavior. And then on the other hand, we're thinking of companies. They've been through a lot with all these crises, the energy crisis, Ukraine, pandemic. So indeed, we need to reduce compliance costs, and we need to ensure regulatory clarity and consistency. So they will have hopefully one set of rules to follow on how to label textiles, which will actually be in complete, we hope again, coherence and synergies with all the other legislation, making it easier to actually comply with the whole regulatory set that is forthcoming. Next slide. Okay, so what are we thinking of doing? This is very early on, by the way, and we're still in preparatory stages. We're running a bit behind again here. We were hoping we had published the call for evidence by now. We haven't yet, but indeed, so we are now preparing the reform still, and the concept for this reform, as you can see, in growing level of ambition. So from the least ambitious to the most ambitious are, first of all, do an evaluation of the regulation. This is quite standard. We're going to do an evaluation of the current regulation, see what actually doesn't work about the current regulation. For those that don't know, the current regulation actually only applies to textile products as defined, meaning any product which has up to no, actually 80% or more of weight in textile fibers, and only about fiber composition. This is the current regulation. So we will see what's working and what's not. There are some problems with concepts. There are some problems of coherence even within the regulation and with forthcoming legislation, of course. We have some procedures which are a bit less clear. We need to make them clearer. So we will address all those issues. And then in terms of novelty of new things being introduced, one of the key problems we find already at this early stage with labels now is that, and by the way, currently there are only physical labels governed at EU level, so there are no digital labels. So the physical labels, one of the key problems we find is that people cut them, and actually sometimes they cut them immediately when they buy the clothes. So we'll try to make the labels not only more resistant to avoid people removing them, but also smaller and more uniform and more harmonized across the internal market. So one of the key reforms to do this is we'll introduce language independent symbols to identify the fibers. This allows not only for smaller labels, but also that people across the member states, irrespective of the language, can identify the fibers. And this, of course, is linked to the digital label we'll be introducing, because then people can access further information by accessing the digital part of the label via their smartphone or any other device. A big part still in fiber composition, a big part of the reform is to make fiber composition more accurate. We hear from not only the industry in general and even consumers, but particularly the recycling industry, that current fiber composition rules and then the identification in the labels is not accurate enough. They need to do their own tests to determine fiber composition. This should not happen. So we will look into that. And then a new labeling domain that will most likely be introduced, because it's actually already announced in the textile strategy, is the sustainability and circularity label. So this is a big word for basically conveying in label format information on eco-design requirements pursuant to the eco-design regulation we showed you. So we're still not sure whether this label will be introduced under this textile labeling regulation or the eco-design regulation itself. By the way, the eco-design regulation itself is still in co-decision. But we will look into this, and we will also assess, this is not decided yet, whether indeed there's a need for a label on top of the digital product passport. We feel strongly that there is a need, because the DPP will have a huge pool of information, and we think consumers, when buying a textile, will need snappy information on the environmental impact of textiles. A bit like washing machines today, when you go and you see those scales of red to green and 1 to 8, so a bit like that. Then there are other labeling domains we're thinking of introducing. Most of these were already assessed in the past. They weren't introduced before. We feel that it's now it's the time. Origin is a famous or infamous one. We will look again into this. So made in, basically. EU-wide harmonized product size is again meant to harmonize the internal market. So basically what happens today is that there are company practices and they differ across member states. So we're also trying to foster the second-hand market. So actually, if a clothes is placed on the market in the north, in Sweden, for example, has its sizes, and then it ends up in my member state, in Portugal, and people have no idea what small or medium or large means. So we will try to have one harmonized product size for clothes for the whole EU. Care is a big one. Care labeling domain we hope to have a very expansive concept of care. Care will not only mean what it means currently, how to wash, iron, dry your clothes, but we are hoping of including instructions on how to take care of your textiles from environmental perspective. So first of all, how to wash, iron, dry them using less energy, being more energy efficient, emitting less microplastics, but also probably how to do end-of-life disposal, and this links to the reform we're doing on waste management. And then also this again linked to another initiative, which is the Empower Consumers Directive initiative. Also a proposal requiring information on durability guarantees and repair instructions. The care label can include and maybe will include repair instructions for your clothes. So this is again something that extends the life of textiles. It's a key aspect to reduce the environmental footprint and will
Antonio,
foster a
I'm
second-hand
really
market.
sorry to interrupt you. Could we please ask you to start wrapping up? Thank you so much, and we apologize for making this request. Okay.
Yeah, no. Allergenic substances, we may include it linked to the REACH reform. Leather and fur authenticity is something both industry and environmental stakeholders are asking. We may expand the scope of the regulation to include these products and convey just the presence of authentic leather and authentic fur. And then some at the top of the ambition, some labeling domains, flammability, organic origin, and social label. These were analyzed in the past. They are asked by some stakeholders, but we're not sure if we're going to go there. So next and final slide, I think. Okay, so just a timeline. The timeline is slipping a bit, but the idea is that we will should end the impact assessment by September if we want to have the proposal adopted by December. This is the timeline announced in the Commission work program. And then co-decision afterwards and entry into force. But just a word of caution here, because this regulation will require delegated and implementing acts. So the start of application will actually only happen after the transitional period for one, and when standards which will likely be necessary are adopted. And delegated and implementing acts will also have their own consultations. So we're bringing in the industry at every step of this regulatory reform. So thank you. I hope I didn't bore you too much, and looking forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonio. Thank you for this overview. We will move to a panel debate now, and I will just summarize what Antonio said by saying that this will be a regulatory shock for the sector, and a lot is unclear as far as I understand, but let's see what the sector feels like, what the clusters feel like, and what they have to say about this. With us, we've got Clara Millard, who is Senior Specialist for Sustainability at MODAC. We've also got Director General at Eurotex, Dirk Vantigem, and we've also got Senior Researcher at Next Technology, Textile, that's your cluster, Euroboostex, Enrico Venturini. Thank you everybody for joining. I will first of all ask everybody to just say a couple of words about your organization, what it is doing specifically, and Dirk, let us start with you.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Happy to join this morning session. So my name is Dirk Vantigem and I represent Eurotex, which is the European Textile and Clothing Confederation. So we basically represent the entire textile ecosystem in Brussels, which means around 160,000 companies operating in the textile ecosystem in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Clara, would you introduce your organization as well?
Yes, thank you, Sibyl. Good morning, everyone. I'm Clara from MODAC, the Fashion Catalan cluster, and we work for the competitiveness of the companies and the fashion and textile ecosystem here in Catalonia, Spain.
Thank you. Enrico?
Yes, good morning, everybody, and also very happy to be here with you today. I'm Enrico Venturini from Next Technology Textile. We are a really small research center based in Prato, in Italy, in Tuscany region, and we work for innovation and technology transfer in favor of textile companies, SMEs in particular, and we are also the managing body of Tuscany Fashion Cluster. So we gather many small, medium enterprises in our ecosystem.
Thank you so much for your brief introductions. I want to delve into the topic by asking about the challenges, and also maybe you would want to immediately share what you thought about this regulation pathway, if it looks like it's something complicated and clear, or you would want to raise other issues than that. And Dirk, I know that you're very much involved in the process to define the transition pathway for textiles. what do you see as the main challenges for the green and digital transition in the textile ecosystem?
Sure. Happy to share a few points on that. And upfront, I would apologize. I will have to leave a little bit early, as I said before, because I have another meeting to run at 9:30. But
so let's talk with you for several minutes.
Yeah, thanks. Let me indeed share a few thoughts on this transition pathway, and also linking to what Antonio was saying about the textile labeling regulation. In general, from a European textile industry perspective, we very much welcome the efforts from the Commission, in developing this textile strategy, and then specifically from DG GROW in trying to put together this this transition pathway, because it's meant to give a kind of an orientation, to make like a semi-operational work plan, which is very much necessary to cope with the dramatic change through which the sector will have to go from a regulatory perspective, from a competitiveness perspective. So as a principle, we welcome the effort, and indeed we have worked closely with the colleagues in DG GROW to try and shape this this pathway. Having said that, allow me just 5 quick comments, just to give a bit of perspective on all this. Number one, we should not forget that today the textile industry is going through very difficult times. We had the energy crisis. First, we had the COVID crisis. We had the energy crisis. We had inflationary pressure. We have today a slowdown in consumer confidence, and that has an impact on the performance of the textile industry. Basically, many textile companies are in trouble, short of orders, high energy bills. So whatever we want to do here in Brussels, we need to be very careful about the impact of those measures on the performance, on the competitiveness of our companies. And again, today, they are going through difficult times. Second important point is the global dimension. Textiles is the second most globalized sector of the European economy. So whatever we do that will have an impact on our European companies, 160,000, we need to be very careful to measure how will this impact the competitiveness of those European companies in this global context. So trying to maintain this level playing field, kind of the fair competition, is critically important, because a lot of that legislation will imply essentially higher cost investment in new technology and new applications. So we need to be very careful about that global dimension. Number 3, the whole textile strategy is obviously about promoting more sustainable, high quality, durable textile products, which we very much support. But we need to be very careful to ensure that there is sufficient demand for sustainable textiles. The consumer today is not willing to pay more for a sustainable textile product. So we all believe in sustainability. We all want to promote sustainability. Our industry is very much behind that. But if the consumer doesn't want to pay for it, we obviously have an issue. So we need to look at that, consumer confidence, procurement practices. There's a lot of initiatives that we need to consider. Fourth point, we need to help our companies to make that transition. Because as we said at the beginning, the change is coming in a big way for our companies. The large majority of textile companies, maybe people are confused, they think of the bigger brands, but that's not the textile industry. The textile industry is essentially small, medium companies, family-owned, 3rd, 4th, 5th generation, who provide high-quality products for the brands. But so we need to help those small companies to make that transition. And that's where I would like to make a special call to the clusters who are probably with us this morning. Their support at regional level is very, very important. To work with the companies, offer them coaching, offer them new technology, whatever it is, to really make that transition. And one concrete example is the Radio GreenTex project, which we have recently launched. But I think Enrico, my colleague, will talk about it maybe later on. And my final point, the Commission knows it. There is a lot of legislation coming, as Antonio was saying. we actually have 16 pieces of law that are on the table. Textile labeling is one of them, but there are 15 actually other pieces. The quality of that legislation is critically important. So making sure that whatever we regulate here in Brussels, that legislation is realistic, is coherent, that the impact of companies is not that they say, oh, in that condition, I stop my business. So we need to work very much together between the legislator and the industry, and I would add, and the clusters in this context, to make sure that we create this new framework which makes sense for the competitiveness of the companies. So these are very quickly some kind of general elements that I want to emphasize. Specifically on the pathway, again, we welcome the effort. I'm happy to hear Cecilia announcing that probably they will try to reduce a little bit the number of action points, because in the initial draft it was a very long list.
So 50 is less than primarily.
Our appeal has been, let's reduce that list, but let's make it very focused, make it very tangible. So we're very happy to hear that the Commission is considering this element. So again, these are some quick inputs from our side. And again, I apologize, I will have to leave after that. But
okay, so we've still got a couple of minutes with you. I think I just want to ask you about the point number 3 that you mentioned, where you said that we need to ensure there is enough demand for sustainable products. And you have briefly mentioned some of the initiatives that should be taken up to do that, for example, procurement practices. What else do you think should be done, to promote sustainable clothing? What can clusters do, maybe?
I mean, there's practical things, there's legislative things. For example, the Green Claims Initiative, which will increase transparency towards the consumer, will be important, so that the consumer understands if he buys a jacket and it says sustainable this or eco that, we need to create transparency in the labels. So it's easier for the consumer to understand what is genuinely green or sustainable and what is not. We need to work closely with the brands in marketing and communication to try and change consumer behavior. We've put on the table the proposal to have a different VAT rate for sustainable garments versus non-sustainable garments. The standard 21% in Belgium. Why don't we come up with a 6% VAT rate for sustainable textiles? Which of course needs to imply that we need to define what is a sustainable textile, which is not an easy process. So these are some type of examples that would hopefully help to increase the demand for, or the willingness and the ability, because there's also a social dimension, the ability of consumers to buy more sustainable products. Because as of today, there's been several surveys and research done. It's between 3 to maximum 10% of consumers that is effectively able and willing to pay a premium for a more sustainable textile garment. So we need to, that percentage has to go up. Otherwise, the whole textile strategy will have failed in its purpose.
Okay, Dirk, thank you so much for this perspective. We wish you good luck with another meeting.
Thank you, and apologies again for leaving a little bit early.
Thank you so much. No worries. Thank you. We will continue the discussion here, and I think the important aspect or important suggestion that was mentioned was, for example, a different VAT for sustainable textiles. We can discuss that one too. But first of all, I want to go into this project that was already referred to, and you, Enrico, have you know a lot about this, and it was to do with the point where the previous speaker said that cluster support at regional level is crucial, that the clusters have to provide support that we need to help our companies go through that transition. So would you maybe say a couple of words on how this specific project is helping companies through that transition?
Yes, sure. We as clusters in textile sector in Europe in general, we are very much trying to push sustainable solutions and best practices in terms of sustainability throughout our ecosystems and SMEs in particular, because they, as Dirk rightly said, it's the SME, the place where the production is done. The brands are doing a very important role because they are close to the market and close to the final consumer. So they mainly do retailing and marketing, if you want, but the manufacturing process is in the hands of the SMEs. So here is where clusters play a very crucial role with their support in terms of innovation, training, adoption of best practices, and compliance with the regulations, also the ones that have been mentioned by the EU representatives before. So in terms of projects, of course, clusters play a very crucial role because they are like the engine that allow the projects to be implemented, conceived, set up, and then implemented. So in this respect, I would like to mention two projects. Sorry, I'm very sorry. The first one is Euroboostex, which is a Eurocluster, and the second one is the one that Dirk mentioned before, which is Greentex, which is a nice. The first one is Eurocluster. I think we also have here the support of a couple of slides. It's a joint initiative of 5 textile clusters in Europe. They are located in Spain, Portugal, France, and Italy. So I'm representing Italy here. The coordinator is Atebal, the textile cluster of Valencia region in Spain. And next slide. Yes, here we are to promote innovation through concrete actions. So here I'm just going to present some of the concrete actions that we're going to implement through Euroboostex. We have a call which is open at the moment for lump sums. We are going to fund 10 individual SMEs for the production of new prototypes, in particular new proof of concepts that are new to the firm. So they not need to be absolutely new for the market, they need to be new for the company. And the call is open until the 7th of June. Then we are going to launch a new call in September, where we will find a consortia of 2 SMEs with these 60K lump sum again available for the companies. And then there will be a third goal for going international, where we're going to explore the possibility of a very new country, I think for almost all of our European SMEs, which is Australia. And here also we're going to fund 15 SMEs with the lump sum of 12Ks. Next slide is about the capacity building. So we are promoting 5 workshops to support the green transition of our SMEs with different topics. 2 have already been implemented about resilience and need assessment, but then we are going to provide also other topics that will be disclosed from time to time in order to improve the capabilities of our SMEs to face the green transition. Of course, the webinars are just the first step. I mean, we are going to provide some information about solutions, technologies, and possible services that the companies can get in order to face the green transition. But then the cluster will support them if they need to take concrete actions. And then the last slide is about the last action that we are going to do with Euroboostex, which is the organization on an info day. The date is not really public yet, but it's going to be in September. Most probably it's going to be the 20th of September. And so we're going to provide, again, online training and joint webinars to our company through the action of Euroboostex. What is Euroboostex trying to do is to support our SMEs in the challenges that they are facing now in terms of sustainability. As Dirk rightly said before, there are many challenges. The first one, of course, is the cost of energy. The cost of energy increased very much during over this last year, especially for the changes that are happening worldwide. So this is for sure the first point, but also in terms of sustainability, there is a growing demand from the market for sustainable products, in particular for recycle-based materials. So in order to promote and increase the production of recycle-based fibers and materials, we need to work on the cost, on the production cost and on the selling price, because this is, as Dirk already mentioned, one of the main challenges that our SMEs are facing at the moment, because everybody's in favor, of course, of buying recycled materials, but this is a cost that the consumer is normally not so willing to accept or to pay. So there are some regulations, mechanisms, incentives like the VAT that Dirk was mentioning before that should be planned in order to allow for this cost-benefit balance to be achieved. And this is one of the first points. A second point, in my opinion, which is very important, is more technological, and it's based on the composition of material. Because if you think about I don't know, PET, the recycling of plastic bottles, of course, this is much easier because it's a sector where the product is standardized, very much standardized, monocomponent. Think about textile and fashion. We have such a big variety of different products, compositions, materials, accessories that are embedded into a final fashion product that is producing a very highly complicated product to be disassembled and then recycled or reused. And this is something that really affects the possibility to do an efficient recycling and to increase the possibility of recycling. And finally, I make a third point, and then I will stop because I don't want to take all the time, is the consumption behavior, because you know very well that nowadays the mass consumption is based on fast fashion and on a high level of consumption, which is really against the philosophy of recycling, you know, because if you want to reduce the environmental impact, because we all know that textile clothing is one of the most impacting sectors in the manufacturing world. But if we want to reduce this impact, we need to consume less products and consume more sustainable products, meaning simpler, with less components and with less materials that are composing the product, which is really something that goes against the fashion design. You know, fashion and textile and fashion is very much based on design. So we need to find the balance between the design of the product as it is conceived now and how the product should be designed in terms of ecology and environmental sustainability. So eco-design is becoming really crucial. So here I try to make some of the main challenges that our textile SMEs are facing, and then I will talk a little bit about Reggio Index.
Thank you so much for naming the challenges, Clara. I want to just briefly remind those challenges to you: cost of energy, problems with recycling, consumption behavior. You have experience. Do you have something to say about problems with recycling as well as an issue, right?
Yes, we have a very great challenge, and we are working also with brands and SMEs for what Enrico was explaining about design for recyclability, for this, for promoting the circular model of production, and the durability also of garments. So we have a gap between both concepts, because we want to design for this recyclability but also we want to design for durability, and the technologies that we have almost in the recycling processes are quite or doesn't ensure the high quality of textiles and final garments that we need for this durability. So we have a very great challenge in the textile recycling industry. So we can incorporate new technology and new industrial practices, new final modeling fabrics and fashion, so we can get the final result as the quality as we want to. So this is a very big challenge for SMEs and fashion brands today. The new legislation asks fashion brands to incorporate this recycled content inside garments, but we need to balance also the quantity of recycled composition or fibers that we can incorporate into the garments for achieving this durability in the textile final garment.
What about the technologies for circularity? What can clusters do to help companies here? What are you doing? Do you have specific good examples that you would want to share?
We are working with new technologies for the classification of textile waste. So as also Enrico was explaining, that we have a very huge number of blended fabrics, blended fibers between the whole fashion garment. So we need technologies for processing all the textile waste. So we are working with this kind of classification with technology, so we can separate cotton from wool, from acrylic, polyester, all these kinds of fabrics, so we can better recycle what the components or the materials that we have, so we can start the chain of the circularity with this kind of recycled fibers.
Clara, would you maybe say a couple of words and expand a little bit on the regional circular initiative that you've got in Catalonia? That's besides all of the pieces of law that are coming.
Yes, as changing this to this linear model to this circular model, here in Catalonia, the government start a voluntary circular fashion pact. So we are inside this fashion pact, the whole value chain of the textile sector. So here in Catalonia, we still have textile industry, and also we have recycling textile industry. And so we are all together working with this very big project, so we can activate the circular model inside Catalonia. So we work with municipalities. We are working also with textile waste management. We are working with consumers. We are working with industry. We are working with the brands. And the idea is that all together can activate this demand of recycled components and for the fabrics, and then recirculate into garments, but also creating awareness into the consumers, and also working with municipalities that will have to collect also the textile waste. So we have we are managing an ecosystem, and we are working in this kind of collaborative project, so we can achieve all the challenges all together.
There is one aspect that I would want to touch upon that Dirk mentioned about the legislation that is coming. It was called by, I think, Antonio as the regulatory shock. And there was sort of a call for clusters to contribute to making this more clear for the industry, if I got that right. Do you see your role here too in trying to grasp that piece of legislation and, before it even comes out, to making it clear and to actually being helpful to the SMEs and other companies? Enrico, would you maybe contribute here?
Yes,
Yes.
sorry.
Sorry, no.
Okay, Clara, let's begin with
no.
you. It's fine, women first.
Me? Sorry. Yes, we are working with that. So we are working with coming up with this new legislation so we can learn what will be the demand and then explain to brands and work a little bit before the legislation is coming. So we are doing this task also here in the cluster. I think it's very, very important.
Enrico?
Yes, the legislation is and the regulations that are coming up are very, very, let's say, predominant for our companies and for our SMEs, because they need to get ready and they need to, digest and implement what the new regulations will require. And this is something that really is concerning our companies, but we are here to help them. The main concern is how to achieve the goals and let's say the indicators that the legislation will establish in terms of content of recycled material and what is a sustainable material and all these kind of things, like the digital product passport and the extended producer responsibility. These are the two main, upcoming legislations that are in the mind of our entrepreneurs. And to this extent, I have to say that we need two main kind of support. The first one is traceability and transparency, as it was mentioned before, because in order to have all the information, the data that you need, and to be transparent towards the final market, you need to track the process and you need to have all the data from the production. And this is the first point. The second point is training. They need training, they need to understand in simple words, with simple concepts and examples, what they need to do, what is the legislation about, what are the requirements. So here is where the cluster can really play a big role in order to support our SMEs.
And how can the digital passport that was already mentioned by several speakers help enable the green and digital transition, Clara?
Well, the digital passport will help a lot with this traceability, and also it's very neat for, I think, for achieving this recyclability also, because it will help a lot to create new materials from the recycled content. So we will know what is really inside the garments, so we can better recycle them. But also concerning about these challenges of the digital passport, and also the digitalization, and also the requirements of in eco-design in garments. Also in our cluster, we are, or our SMEs ask a lot about which kind of tools will Europe provide to SMEs to incorporate the whole information and how this process will be done, because it's much expensive to calculate the impacts and the environmental impacts, for example, for one garment. So which kind of tools will the Commission will provide to SMEs, so we can all together measure in a same methodology. So if we have to compare products between brands, which kind of methodology will SMEs have to apply, and which kind of tools also will be able to work with SMEs. So this is one of the concerns.
Any concerns to share in terms of digital passport? And Dico, would you agree with what Clara has said?
Yeah, totally. But I would like to add something, because I would start from the level of digitization of our SMEs, because then the digital passport will come. But what our SMEs need is to be more digital, of course, but they don't really know where to start from. So my experience is like, okay, we are talking about this blockchain technology. For instance, just to give an example, we have been talking about this since many years now, and still SMEs are very reluctant in the adoption of blockchain, unless they are not really pushed very hard by the stakeholders. And this is why, because they don't think they need it. Okay, until, to be very direct, until their customer, which is the brand, in most cases is the brand, until the brand doesn't ask to the SME, the provider, to adopt the blockchain technology, they say, why should I adopt it? And so there is a need, as I said before, for training also the SMEs, because blockchain technology, I'm sure it will come, and it will help a lot our SMEs in getting all the data and the information to be transparent, and to provide all the information that they need in order to produce the digital product passport. Okay, so we need to start really with this digitization process, but in most of the cases, they need to understand why and what it is and what is useful for, okay? And this will help a lot also the circular transition, in my opinion, because once you have all the information and your process is transparent, then you can provide the information to the final consumer, so on the market, about the product that you are selling. And this is very important for recycling, because the main problem now for recycling textiles, end-of-life textiles, is that you don't really know what it is inside. So if you start this virtuous circle of tracking with absolute, let's say, assurance of what is inside, then it will be easier to recycle. Because as Lara rightly mentioned, in order to recycle, you need to, first of all, separate the textiles by composition. So you need to separate the different fibers, the different colors, and the different structure of textiles. But composition is the first point, for sure.
We've got a question from the audience. What's the way to control garments coming from out of the EU with the European sustainability, also digital regulations? I think this is the question that we could also refer to the European Commission representatives if they are still with us and they would like to take that one. But also you, Enrico and Clara, if you have something to say on that, please do. The floor is yours. What happens with the garments that are coming from out of the EU? Cecilia is with us from the DG Grow. Do you want to take that one? Antonio from DG Grow as well. Is Antonio still with us?
I am, yes.
Thank
you.
you.
Hear me?
Do you want to? Yes, we can.
Yeah, so I don't know if Cecilia wants to step in, but just quickly, this is a very important issue. So the eco-design regulation, the proposal is a new approach regulation. So, and it applies to products placed on the EU market. This means that it doesn't matter where they're manufactured, rules apply as long as the products are placed on the market. And this raises issues, of course, of customs controls, market surveillance of products coming in from other jurisdictions where we have no jurisdiction. Of course, the EU doesn't have jurisdiction, but they will have to comply with the rules. So let me just say to finalize that we are, of course, talking to these third countries. We have FTAs with a lot of them. We're trying to bring similar reforms there too. We're trying to support them. We have some financing. There will be guidelines, I imagine, but it is a struggle. And the idea is that the EU will become a beacon of this new economy, this new sustainable economy, and then the rest of the world will follow. So it will eventually be aligned. But for a transition period, there will be a challenge indeed that the third world, the third countries, sorry, do keep up with this reform. But they will have to, as long as they want to place products on the EU market. Yes.
How do you think that new legislation will influence the competitiveness of companies, especially in brands? Monse is asking. Antonio?
Okay, for me. No, indeed, this and also what Dirk said. I mean, this is a key concern of ours. We need to keep this regulatory shock, as we call it. We need to keep it proportionate. We need to keep to be very careful of not hurting the competitiveness of the EU industry. So. So indeed, first of all, we need to take it slow. We need to do a step-by-step approach. Eco-design itself, the implementation for textile products, is foreseen to be a gradual effort. We will start, I imagine, small and then go from there. As I said, there are challenges with information requirements and performance requirements. Information was mentioned already. We'll be very careful at looking at requiring detailed information across the supply chain from very far up, because this will be very challenging for SMEs to get information from sourcing of raw materials and very early stages of production, especially if they take place in third countries. But performance is even more impactful. So if we ban the least performing products, economic models will need to change. And we're looking very careful at this. We do intend to force a change in economic models, but the very lowest performing. So the ones characterized by fast fashion, the most polluting, the lowest quality. Clearly, we need to be clear about this. They will have to change. But the idea is not to hurt the EU economy where it excels, actually, which is in actually the best design in the world, the best quality in the world. This is not the idea at all. So we're looking very carefully at keeping this reform proportionate, keeping this reform grounded to reality, also to technical feasibility, not only economic feasibility. And we certainly want the EU economy and industry to thrive, because if we don't have a strong textile industry in the EU, then we will have no environmental impact, good environmental impact at all, because then everything is produced outside the EU. So we're very clear about this.
Thank you. Corinna is asking, how do the eco-design regulation deal with the different eco-labels and the different requirements coexisting today? Is there a plan to unify them in some way? And I think that's, again, back to you, Antonio, unless Cecilia wants to jump in too.
Cecilia is always welcome to jump in, but if I may, so one of the reforms we will be doing in the context of eco-design is indeed to reform the EU eco-label. So we hear industries' cries against the complexity and the lack of adequacy of the criteria to award the EU eco-label. We hear this. And so we will do a revision of these criteria, but crucially, we will seek to align these criteria with eco-design, meaning all manufacturers intending to place products on the market will have to comply with eco-design. So the conformity assessment procedures will apply to everybody. So we are looking into applying the very same conformity assessment procedures, the very same metrics, the very same standards to eco-label. But then, in order to have an eco label, of course, you will need to reach to aim for a higher level of performance. This is obvious, right? Because the EU eco label is a mark of excellence. But we hope that the metrics, the conformity assessment procedures, the standards will be largely the same. So this alignment will not only make eco label much clearer, it will also reduce drastically implementation costs. So this is the idea.
There is another question from the audience. It's a bit extensive, but I will just try to read it out. It's a question for everybody, but basically it's about the use of digital passports. If you all think that it's useful enough for the end consumer, should they check digital passport garment by garment in a shop to check and know if that garment is upcycling, downcycling, recycled, not recycled? Do you not think that it's practical? Is there a European certification to know if the garment is 100% recycled or not? It's a good question. It's about the consumer who, you know, is the end consumer of everything that the textile industry produces. Is it practical enough for the end user? What do you think? Maybe Clara and Enrico, because you have sort of advertised the passports as a positive initiative. What would you say to this one?
I will say yes, it will be very useful and to check garment by garment, because each garment is quite very difficult, different. So it's practical that we know the information of each one of the garments that we are consuming. And about the certification or the unique certification, I think that the idea that Antonio just explained is that we will have, or we are going to one eco label, no? So we now have more than 200 eco labels inside the country. So consumers are a little bit, I don't know how to say it, but pretty confused about what the eco labels are telling them, no? So if we can transition to one eco label for textile, I think it would be pretty nice and it will help.
Thank you so much for this.
Yeah.
Yes, Enrico.
Maybe I can add something regarding also the measurement of the carbon footprint of textile products, because many companies now are going through this process with the LCA analysis. And so this is another very important information. It's important, as Clara mentioned, to standardize the information that you provide to the final consumer, because there are so many different certifications that it's very hard for our companies to get orientation and choose which kind of certification or standard is the best one to be adopted, because it's still on a voluntary basis. Most of the times is the brand, so the company selling the product on the final market that decide which kind of certification, and the SMEs has to adapt to this kind of decision. So if we have just one unique form of certification and also of information that will be given to the final consumer, for sure it will be beneficial for everybody, for the companies, for the brands, and for the final consumer.
One wrap-up final question to both of you, Clara and also Enrico. We talked about, Dirk talked about global dimension and mentioned that textiles was the second most globalized sector, and it's the global dimension that we should be thinking about. And we talked about competitiveness a little bit. How can we create a favorable environment for competitiveness and resilience, or what else can we do to basically make the companies, the lives of the companies easier? As it was mentioned, they are going through hard times because of energy issues and other challenges that were mentioned. What else can we do? What are the first steps to make their life easier? Clara.
Oh, huge question.
Maybe we can
well,
pick something that we haven't, haven't discussed yet. Maybe there is something else that we need
yes, I
to
think
single out.
for the future, or thinking about a little bit with the mind in the future, is helping also brands and companies to diversify business models or implement new business models into their business. So applying circular new business models into their day-to-day, I think it will help to transition to this new circular economy. So helping brands to think a little bit further into the future and how it will be the fashion sector in the future. I think it's a big challenge, not a quite challenge for today, but a challenge for the future.
Thank you so much, Enrico.
Yes, I think we need to provide SMEs with very practical information and data. For instance, as I was mentioning before, the Regis Green Text project is supporting the realization of the recycling hubs throughout Europe and the textile regions of Europe. So one thing that we want to do is to study the flows of end-of-life materials, because as we mentioned before, most of the times companies buy recycled materials from faraway countries like India, or mainly India, I would say. So we need to know where the material comes from and what is the composition of the material. And we are trying to study like a scale of recyclability potential, because not all the material, of course, can be recycled. So we need to pick the best one and dispose the worst one. I mean, not all of the textile that is disposed around the world can be recycled. So we need to start from here, study the material, study the technologies also for recycling, because I come from Prato, which is a textile manufacturing area where the recycling of wool through mechanical processes is in place since the 50s, the 60s of the past century. So we have a strong tradition, but the technology has to be updated and has to be innovative, because as of now we have mechanical and chemical recycling, but we still need to implement these on a large scale at industrial level. And last point is the study of the possible applications, because now we are considering recycling as upcycling, so fiber to fiber, but the recycling of textile can be in all other sectors and in many different applications. So also the study of the applications, and this is part of the eco-design, is very important for our companies in order to increase and improve the level of recyclability of the products that are disposed on the market today. And finally, consumer sensitization and training by adopting to improve the adoption of more responsible and conscious consumption models, and training for the companies in order to adopt new business models that are more in line with the circularity, let's say, theory or models.
Thank you very much for your inputs, for your insights, for your so many suggestions and solutions, new ideas, and emphasis on the ideas that are already known or have been known before. That was, I think, very, very useful. Thank you also for that term, regulatory shock. I think it's once you use it, you then can start preparing for it, and then it becomes less of a shock, I hope. And with all your collaboration, I hope that this is what will happen. So thank you so much for your really sincere contributions and for participating in this panel debate, Clara and Enrico. And further on, I would like to give the floor back to Nina and to ask her to present the funding opportunities that await.
Many thanks to Vida, and many thanks to Antonio, Cecilia, Clara, Enrico for all the points. Very interesting to follow. You will probably find some of the points that you mentioned in the funding opportunities very quickly to close our talk today. So let me start. There is a call open on circular solutions for textile value chains based on extended producer responsibility, a term that we've had before in the presentations. So this is a call for projects to contribute to recommendations on best innovative solutions for the identification of material composition of used textiles and textile waste, and to provide recommendations on the design for recycling for textile projects that allows the use of targeted extended producer responsibility schemes. And the projects should recommend policy tools to reach EU greenhouse gas reduction targets that are set until 2050. It's a forthcoming call, so you can start preparing and then apply from the 17th of October onwards. It's a Horizon Innovation Action. You see the topic ID here in the screen and the link in the chat to look at this call. Then there is another call for circular solutions through innovation in sorting, recycling, and the design for recycling. So projects are expected to roll out systemic solutions for textile sorting to using innovative digital technologies, and to provide feasible solutions for facilitated disintegration and increase the uptake of mechanical recycling solutions and thermomechanical, chemical, and other recycling solutions. Also upcoming, but a two-stage deadline model. So you can also start preparing for this call if you're interested. It opens on the 17th of October. This time it's the Horizon Research and Innovation Action. You see the topic ID in the screen and the link in the chat. And as was already mentioned by Enrico, the EuroBoostTex Eurocluster has currently a call open for innovation services. Targeting SMEs. So in case any of you SMEs in your clusters are interested, they can apply for lump sums of up to 15,000 euros to launch new products and services to the market. They have a list of eligible funding activities, including technical assessment and viability of new to fund products or services, prototype developing, technical prototyping, testing, and business plans for exploitation and revision of the business models. The deadline is the 7th of June, and the information is published on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. And last but not least, to mention, there are several opportunities for SMEs in different ecosystems that are provided by the Euroclusters. You see here in the screen a list of all the calls that are currently published on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform in different ecosystems by the Euroclusters, with deadlines now in May, and June, July. So please have a look at them to see whether this here are any calls that might be interesting for your SMEs to apply for innovation and training. Thank you, Julia, and see you.
Thank you, Nina. I will just remind everybody that all of the links are in the chat still. And the discussion can still continue on the ECCP general discussion group on LinkedIn. You can see it on the slide now as well, and it is also in the chat. The link is in the chat. So do join it and do raise the issues that matter to you. Some of them we have answered today, but I'm sure there are many more, especially in this textile context, where, as I have mentioned many times now, regulatory shock is coming soon. So there is really a lot to discuss and a lot to do in terms of the transitions. So do continue the dialogue on the LinkedIn platform as well. Do register for the next talks as well. New patent package, 31st of May, middle of June, 14th of June, we'll have skills for cluster managers. And also a special session on the 21st of June, ECCP Trend Universe. So do register for the next talks if you have not done so. Your participation is very welcome, and we are truly happy that so many of you have connected today, and we hope that the same happens with the rest of the talks that I have just listed, so do register for the next talks and register on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. If you have not done so, it's the European Online Hub for Industry Clusters. There's a barcode and there's also a link in the chat that you can find and register on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for the fruitful discussions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for contributing to the discussions, and have a good rest of the day. Have a very fruitful work day today as well. See you next time.